and a major city yet to be determined in Russia. And Shanghai, People's Republic of China.
Travis Wayne Goodsell, since the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints will not stop and leave me alone after winning, I'm not going to stop. We're going to talk about the church's racket. It's a criminal operation using money scams. I was doing some math calculus today, or math calculations today. Ensign Peak Advisors had the whistleblower in 2019 exposed that the church has $100 billion in just Ensign Peak Advisors from tithing. The church has numerous, dozens of different sources of income that they have. One of the latest ones that they've been doing is the Christmas vending machine thing. Light the World, I guess. They bragged about getting millions on that for last year. And so the church has numerous different sources of income. And people assume that tithing is the big one. Yeah, it does seem that way. With the whistleblower, we now understand that it's getting close to 150 billion for Ensign Peak Advisors. That's the way it was going, as we were told by Lars Nielsen. So that means that that's just 10% of the total asset value taken in for tithing. 1.5 trillion. So, does the church actually spend all that money, which would be 1.35 trillion? Or, yeah, 1.35 trillion. Do they spend that much? Or have they spent that much? So that all that is gone, it's all used up. Church is great, they take care of people, and build buildings and temples. That's how much it costs, right? Well, there are 170 temples now, and 31,315 church buildings. And divided into the 1.5 trillion comes out to 47.6 million in costs and maintenance per year. That's just taking the raw numbers, not the actual numbers. So it's obviously not that much. The temples that have been built, at the most, I use the highest number, because in the higher populated areas they're going to cost more than out in the rural areas. And so I'm doing 50 million at the top number that was provided. And that comes out to 8.5 billion in costs for the 170 temples. Far away from 1.5 trillion, aren't we? And with 25 years since Hinckley began the smaller temples, including the number of church buildings, considering them the same cost and maintenance as temples. That's per year additional 1.19 billion. I would have to see how much churches cost. I'm willing to bet that we're looking at 500,000, maybe $1 million. So far less than temples, obviously. That's why they do cookie cutter church blueprints, is to minimize expenses. And then they hire their own people to build them, which also cuts down on expenses, etc., etc. We had Bishop Lester the Child Molester Nielsen out in Riverton because he thought it was hilarious that he exposed himself to kids and bragged and laughed about it. That's why I give him the name, because he thought it was funny to expose himself to little kids. That's something you don't want to go around telling people. Nonetheless, he also cursed me when my dad kicked me out of the house way back in those days. So I don't like him. He's not a good man. And of course, in the church, when you are that way, they promote you. He was bumped up to counselor in the stake presidency after I had gone away. Nonetheless, so yeah, we're looking at a lot of extra money not being accounted for here. Book of Mormon publications are also involved, but with the Book of Mormon fund, that sucks it away from tithing. Plus, they're going online for publications. That, cuts it way down on expenses. Employment, there's no employment for tithing. Those are from separate sources of income. So BYUs, for example, the employees are paid through the money through BYUs. They're not paid through tithing or any other source. And so where's all this? It obviously more than $1 trillion. What happened to it? Where is it? What's going on? And clearly, the church says the first presidency came out with a statement after the whistleblower blew the whistle. They said they do that with all their sources of income. Take 10%, invest it. Where is the money going that is not being invested? Where is that going? Is it just sitting in the account, collecting, getting larger and larger? Is the actual tithing bank fund or LLC fund, whatever fund it's used to store in, is that over $1 trillion? They won't show us the source. They won't reveal to us the amount. Plus all the other accounts that we still are unaware of unless they advertise it. The LDS charities, Nelson got up and said, oh yeah, $2 billion. Well, yeah, that was 10 years ago when you had the $2 billion. And you're claiming you spent $2 billion or you got $2 billion? Because you just said in your first presidency statement in 2019 December that you took out 10% of the $2 billion, which means 200 million, and put that in an LLC company. And then, since we see that you have the practice of not spending all the money, Where is the majority of that 2 billion minus the 200 million? Where is that? And so when they announced that they're helping Ukraine, and they sent a couple of truckloads of food for 5 billion Ukrainians and 1,000 sleeping bags for 5 million Ukrainians, and it's 11,000 Ukrainians who are Mormons, by the way. What are they doing with the rest of that money that they obtained, that donated source specifically for Ukrainian aid? What are they doing with all that extra money? Because it's clear they're likely spending only about less than 10% of the actual income they receive for the source for which it's supposed to be used. This tax fraud is huge. Then you throw in Australia. The news in Australia exposed that the church has offshore accounts. This is what criminals do. Oh my God. They would have to launder the money into these offshore accounts. Oh dear God. So I have not heard anything as to whether there's a lawsuit pending in the Australia exposure. But we are looking at a major criminal racket, a protection racket. Because it gets worse. I've already told you all this other stuff. The scripture on tithing. Let's refer to that for you. There is some debate because it was in 1838 that it was given. And I've gone over the history of that time period, which causes it to be speculative that Joseph Smith was still practicing the law of consecration according to his method, not Brigham Young's claimed method. And so there didn't seem to be any indication that Joseph Smith changed to tithing. Nonetheless, Section 119, July 8th, verse 4. And there are many of us in the church who go, what? But the prophets, President Benson has been one that I remember because that's when I was baptized, and they came out in church and said, oh, Benson says you got to pay 10% of your wages. Not according to this section that has some dubious origins that need to be exposed. Nonetheless, verse 4, and after that, those who have thus been tithed shall pay 1/10 of all their interest annually. Wages are not interest. Interest only occurs if you own a business. Now there's investment interest, which is not applying here. That's a newer thing. This is for example, if you're a farmer, you have to do an investment, pay for farm equipment, land, seed, etc., and then you have to plant the seed and harvest it. The harvested amount, you need some for food, for your own family and yourself, but then you have expenses. Depending on how big you are, you might have laborers who work for you. You've got to pay them. So the way to make money off of farming is to take your excess to the store, the market, and then the money that you get from that is to cover your costs and expenses, plus more seed and any maintenance for the equipment and such for the next harvest. And then you go through the cycle again and again. And you're supposed to stay in the black, as it's called, and avoid going into the red, which means you make less money than you invested from the deal. And if you keep making red year after year, you're going to fail in your business, because you have to keep reinvesting more and more money to cover the red expenses each year, on top of the need to pay for more investment for the next harvest. And so if you're in the black, it's 10% of that. So if you make $100 extra for the year of crops, you give $10 in tithing to the church. Those laborers, they don't have any interest. They worked for you. They're your slaves. They don't pay tithing. It would be a protection racket, like a criminal organization. I'm sure all Mormons have seen The Sopranos, because they're not allowed to watch HBO or R-rated movies. It's a mature, so it's not R-rated, Travis. Well, in Canada, all Mormons know that even mature ratings are worse than R, and therefore should not be watched either. But there are some R-rated movies that get downgraded up in Canada to PG-13, or 14, I guess it is, up in Canada. So those are always fun debates with the Canadians at Rick's College, and I'm sure at BYU too. And then Germany, you can have NC-17 here in America, and it'll be a 13 rating in Germany. Hilarious. And so I hope you can see the scam that the church is pulling on everybody here. Not just Mormons, but the government. And I came across an article today from a concerned Mormon on his website, where I've already gotten from him on another article on his website about the Articles of Incorporation in 1923 by Heber J. Grant, because the United States shut the church down under John Taylor the year he died in prison. They don't want to tell us that. But he points out to us that the incorporation or incorporated status is a sole corporation, and we as Mormons have no say in the church. If the church were to collapse, no Mormon would get their money back. especially since it's got offshore accounts, funneling the bulk of the trillions to them. And yeah, I just saw the other day that the Twitter guy apparently took the lead as the richest man. Hilarious. He's nowhere near the richest. I remember in the days where the church didn't even get ranked as the most wealthiest religion. The Catholics were always on top. With the whistleblower, the church just blew the Catholics away. And with what I'm going over with you today, it's far worse of a gap. Like I said, these guys are the biggest, wealthiest, longest crime organization the world has ever known. All because of Brigham Young. Not Joseph. Joseph had nothing to do with this. Like I said, he wasn't doing tithing. That wasn't his thing. But nonetheless, even if he was, Brigham Young took the church in a whole different direction. He said Joseph Smith was a Christian and believed in Jesus as his Christ. Dear God. And how many of us go around the world on our missions saying, oh yeah, Joseph Smith saw Jesus, and Jesus told him that Jesus is an abomination in his sight. Dear God, how we have all fallen for it. But yeah, that's what they do. They lie to you. They tell you that look at all that we're giving, 1,000 sleeping bags to 5 million Ukrainians. We're so good, we're helping. 2 truckloads of food. Because the news still says they're in a crisis, a humanitarian crisis. There are people dying of starvation. One was a woman who died in order for her daughter to live. And the church is all claiming, well, yeah, we're doing all we can. We're in a position to help, so we're helping. Oh my God. But Harold B. Lee did some changes to the Articles of Incorporation. And I'll read the Fifth Amendment. Upon the winding up and dissolution of this corporation. What? What? What are they talking about? The church and the priesthood are going to be eternal. Never to be taken again from the earth. As it's been taken away many times, just from Joseph Smith dying. And when the United States shut down Brigham Young's church, gone. And here they are saying again, we're going to trash this church, take the money and run. There's the song. Take the money and run. See the description below. The church purposely is doing all this to retire on some Caribbean island with all their 12-year-old polygamous girls, wives. Oh my God. See, this really hit me, as it did him too. He says, upon the winding up and dissolution of this corporation, ... did you catch that? ? They are purposely tanking this church. The whistleblower said they no longer need Mormons to supply tithing to take care of all the buildings. Ensign Peak Advisors alone can take care of the buildings. As I went over with you, and then have extra left over. They are purposely destroying this church. And under Nelson, ever since he declared that he paid Putin to cause the war in Ukraine, and a major city yet to be determined in Russia, how many extra billions did you give Putin for this war? Dear God. I got to see John Wick earlier today. Yeah, they call it leverage. The Russians actually call it compromat. So when Max Roth of Fox 13 News Utah came out the month later and said, we found that the church had almost a dozen LLC corporations thanks to Orrin Hatch's tax bill, totaling $32 billion. Yeah, I know exactly what happened. This is what Putin and Russia does. Do us a favor, though. They get you criminally involved as leverage, compromat. And the church likewise did it with them. A mutual assured compromat. And they're going to use nukes. Everybody is deeply concerned, more and more every day, as Putin's physical health is getting worse, which, if you know you're about to die, screw the rest of the world. And the ambassador is saying, you better stop giving weapons and machinery to Ukraine. You're going to cause World War III. We all know this is already World War III. Everybody is scared to death of the nukes getting dropped. Mutual assured destruction. It's going to happen. They should have gone in immediately and said, leave them alone, and pushed them back into Russia and done some bombing in Russian military sites. But instead, nope. They allowed Putin a foothold. That's how we won World War II, is we got the foothold on the beach. And that changed the war. So, he further talks about how the remaining assets shall be distributed to a non-profit fund, foundation, or corporation which is organized or operated exclusively for charitable, educational, or religious and or scientific purposes, and which has been established its tax-exempt status under 501c3 of the IRS code. Yeah, LLs are not offshore accounts. Because if the church is going to actually do this and destroy themselves, chasing out as many Mormons as they can by being offensive, pushing Jesus, presented an idol god, declared himself the Antichrist. All you guys were complaining about were lazy learners. Well, I heard, I'm the Antichrist. Well, you all missed that. But yeah, you guys are getting offended as Brad Wilcox exposes himself as a racist and a sexist, and the church silences the media, and I'm destroyed. And yeah, they are purposely being as bad as they can be. They took away the missionary or the home teaching program. They are sending out missionaries while war is imminent worldwide. I did the video before conference, and it was a breakout video, and then the church came to YouTube and shut me down. I didn't get any more views. And then, sure enough, for conference, for the first 2 sessions, missions, go missions, missions. Yeah, I saw exactly what they were doing. And then the grooming of the 12-year-old girls for polygamy. And all you guys were distracted. 180 years, 666, 18th Relief Society President, 666. They're just blatant now. And Mormons are missing it. The dumbest of the Mormons are missing all these clues. They're right in the Book of Mormon. If these Mormons were actually devoted to the Book of Mormon, as they all claim they are, and were actually studying it and researching it, they would know that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the great and abominable church, as described in graphic detail in the Book of Mormon, as I've been doing videos on. And so, all these Mormons who are being used as pawns to commit crimes for the church, as I'm now a victim of it, are going to be abandoned. They played you as suckers and losers, and they're going to leave you. They're going to abandon you. Upon the winding up and dissolution of this corporation. Shall we go over the scripture? Because Joseph Smith knew this was coming. And yes, he even had it in section, or it's not a section. Brigham Young refused to put it in because Brigham Young is called out as Judas. 19 July 1840, the B version. But in section 101, the parable that Joseph Smith gives for the latter days of Mormons, verse 51 is where our focus is. And the enemy came by night and broke down the hedge, and the servants of the nobleman arose and were affrighted and fled. And we went over this in last year's Sunday school lesson. The manual. They call you the servants. Because certainly the prophets would never flee. I just read to you from Harold B. Lee's edition in the Articles of Incorporation. They're going to flee. Joseph Smith said they're going to flee, and they're going to flee. It's amazing how Joseph Smith is a true prophet of God, and nobody else since then. Are you not catching on yet, guys? The church purposely is being as bad to the bone as they can be. Purposely corrupt. Horrifically corrupt. Cringeworthy corrupt. I mean, 90-year-old men with 12-year-old girls. Corrupt. The protection racket of tithing. Corrupt. And how many Mormons think they're still the good guys? So how big of a faith crisis do you think those really devoted Mormons are going to have once the church winds up and dissolves the corporation? I told you that's what they were doing. They were preparing to flee when they released the handbook. That was a coveted handbook that they sued the Tanners for releasing. And they just bring it out. Yeah, oh yeah, you can join the Church of Satan. That's okay. We discourage it, but we're not going to excommunicate you. We're not going to take away your temple recommend. Oh, incest? Yeah, that's okay. It's in there. I did the videos. Nobody cared. What is wrong with you people? So yeah, they've already got their exit strategy and they're in full operation. They know nukes are coming. And regardless of where in the world their island is that they've all got prepared and set up for, they're just biding their time, taking in as much extra money as they can, and giving out as little as they can. When are you guys going to catch on?